And we're live. It is Wednesday, September 30th, 2020, 5 o'clock p.m., the day after the most grotesque shit show in the history of the United States presidency. There have been worse moments, worse moral moments. You know, the Indian removal, the internment of Japanese Americans, you know, the protection of slavery. But it is hard to think of many more embarrassing moments in the history of the presidency than last night. I expected it to be really bad. It really did. It was so much worse than I expected it to be. I actually am impressed with how bad it was. The president outdid himself with rank assholishness. And I guess the evidence that we had an inkling it was going to go this direction was that I asked Tom to come on and chew it over with us before the event happened. Because, you know, there is nobody who has cataloged the idiocy, the mania, the fracacta nuttiness, and the degradation the way Tom has. If you don't follow him on Twitter, he is Radio Free Tom. He is, I don't know quite how to describe Tom Nichols. He's a professor at the Naval War College. And of course, I would be remiss if I didn't say that all the opinions he says today should be attributed directly to the U.S. Department of Defense and to Secretary Mark Esper in particular. No, that's a joke. They all represent his personal views and should not in any way be attributed to Secretary of Defense Mark Esper. We are not allowed to have fun anymore. Not even allowed to have a facsimile of the presidency anymore. But in lieu of all that, we can have Tom Nichols. Tom, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ben. Great to be with you. Great to see you again. We haven't ever since the pandemic arrived. We haven't been able to.
I think we've been on Morning Joe together once since the pandemic, right?
And we ran into each other. We ran into each other in DC a couple of times. I think once at the old MSNBC before it burned.
Yeah,
before the fire.
Right. And I knew you were going to be there.
And you went without shoes.
Yes.
Okay, wait, hold on. What is this like, you teased this on Twitter too. What is this, like, barefoot, like, you're in
I'm going to let Tom explain this. He has a long-term Twitter campaign against people who don't wear shoes on airplanes.
Yes, I have this thing. I remember this. Yes, I have this thing about people dressing like adults in public places. Like, don't put your bare feet on the seats on an airplane, you know. And so, here comes Ben walking in his nice suit, you know, gray, looking very Washington, very, business class. And I looked down, and there he is in flip-flops, just for me. I couldn't even see it. It was off camera.
It was off camera, and of course, I would have lied about it under oath had it been, had Bob Mueller subpoenaed me, but he didn't. I often go on Morning Joe and let's be honest, in COVID era, everyone does this.
Oh yeah, it's everybody's business on top, party on the bottom now.
Exactly, and I just want to be clear, not wearing shoes as we speak. I'm sorry if that makes you uncomfortable,
but, like,
Tom.
Isn't this appropriate now? Like,
yes,
you
exactly.
are in your own home. It wouldn't drive him nuts.
Thank you. This is my point.
You're okay with it?
If you wore Vibram 5 fingers, like, then we would have a problem because those are never appropriate in any circumstance.
Yeah, Tom, are you wearing pants?
I am indeed wearing pants, and I'm also here. I'm wearing, like, totally mellow summer shoes.
All right.
Ooh, those are quite nice.
I'm not wearing any. Are you wearing shoes, Kate?
Yeah. I'm wearing knockoff Birkenstocks that I got on Amazon.
This is
okay, and it's kind of impressive that you could do that.
We have Kate's foot in the frame. I, out of respect for Tom's genteel sensibilities, I'm not going to pull my foot into the frame. What'd you make of the debate, Tom?
Well,
was it befitting American democracy?
You captured it that, I was expecting a shit show, and I thought it would be terrible, and I thought that Trump would, go in there and do all the things he did. I did not expect it to be that bad. And my two reactions are there cannot be any more doubt, even among the president's supporters, that there is something deeply mentally wrong with Donald Trump. I mean, I think, for 4 years, we've kind of, Joe, he's in your guts, he's nuts and he's just kind of weird. And no, that last night, I was sympathetically cringing on his behalf, even though I cannot stand the man. I was like, this is almost exploitative. This is weird. There's something really wrong with him. That, he's the commander in chief. He has access to the nuclear codes. I mean, this is somebody who's just deeply unstable. So that was.
You could actually give them to him, though. Don't you think that there's somebody who would just be like, just slip in another set of codes?
He's got them. Don't kid yourself.
He has them every day. Every day.
So,
but the other thing I thought was this was a strategy and it failed, because I think it was very clear that he went in there with a strategy that said, if I just interrupt, let me back up and say the strategy was.
So roll the clock back. It's now 5 minutes before the debate. He's going to go out there and he's explaining the strategy to you. How does now turn off?
This is the problem of Trump being around people who only agree with him, because they all agreed that the strategy is, hey, Joe Biden is senile. Joe Biden is weak and easily confused. He doesn't know what he's doing. All you have to do is interrupt him enough and attack him enough, and he will totally lose his way and cry and wander off. I think Biden, could Biden have been better? I guess. I mean, Chris Wallace was the guy that looked more rattled than anybody.
Yeah.
To be honest with you. And I think Biden just got, flummoxed and said, well, I think Philippe Reines summed it up beautifully when he said, trying to debate Donald Trump is like trying to play Carnegie Hall while somebody's sitting in the front row with an air horn. And I think the more it didn't work, because every time they came back to Joe Biden, he would kind of take a beat and he'd say, here's the deal. He did his Biden thing. Come on, man, here's the deal. And then he would do something that I thought was extremely effective, and we can talk about Biden in a second, but this actually relates back to Trump's strategy, where he would, he was always looking at Wallace. And then when he finally got tired of Trump, he would turn and he'd look into the camera and say, and you people at home, how are you doing? And Trump, you could see Trump, the pursing lips and the shoulders would start, and he's like, you can see the little, hamsters going around in his head saying,
right. He knows there's empathy being expressed that he's incapable of processing, and he's he's capable of processing that he could never have done that, but he's not capable of doing it.
But also, I think Trump was flummoxed by this movie that they've all played out among themselves inside the White House of that Biden was supposed to go, oh, I just want somebody to give me my lime jello and bring me back to bed. I'm scared, like Brooks in the Shawshank Redemption. I don't like it here anymore. I don't want to stay. And instead, Biden acted like a guy who was a senator for 40 years and a vice president for 8 years. And he kind of went, holy Christ, I guess I got to slog through this with this idiot. And I think Trump said, well, if what I'm doing is not working, then I have to turn up the volume and the temperature. And then he gets into a fight with Chris Wallace. There were whole parts of the debate where Biden just sat back and watched Trump fight with Chris Wallace. So I think that the combination of the two things, Trump's mental instability and this strategy that went up in flames, turned this into more of a shit show than I even expected it to. Because when Donald Trump panics, and there were several moments last night where he clearly was just panicking, he goes nuts. He loses his mind. And in this case, he couldn't just say, thank you, and walk off like he does in the press conferences. That's what he does when he digs himself into a hole in those White House press conferences, which, as you know, Ben, I have faithfully followed and tweeted as as part of my bearing witness to the madness. He was stuck there. And the Proud Boys moment was a classic. I would condemn them. And then there's the only moment in the debate where there's dead silence, where Biden goes, well, then do it. And Chris Wallace says, well, then go ahead. And then for one moment, there was actually silence in the room.
Yeah, it was.
Couldn't do it. It
was an incredible moment.
Yeah. And so my takeaway is that it was a humiliation for the United States of America. I could hear the laughing all the way from Moscow. Like, that was like a Russian TV show. That's the kind of debates they have on Russian television. And I am not part of the no more debates crowd. The next debate is a town hall format, and I want Donald Trump there. I want Donald Trump to do that in front of a bunch of undecided voters who are asking him questions. His last town hall did not go well, and it certainly won't go well the next time. And I think the American people need to see him doing that more.
Yeah, so let's just talk about that for a second, because I think that the town hall, I mean, as you said, that the real moment that he looked so bad last night was when he went after Chris Wallace. Everyone knew he was going to go after Biden. That was predictable. And if he goes after a voter like that, if he picks on someone, like, don't you think that is just all kinds of bad? Like, I was talking to someone who works in the White House that I'm close to, that was telling me that even he thinks a point at which it's like, you just can't, there will be Trump fatigue. You can't just every single time go in and Godzilla the shit out of something and knock down buildings and breathe fire and be this like weird, like crazed alpha that like eventually it's just people are just going to like completely check out. And that actually seems like, even if it was only like, I think there was one focus group I saw, this is like one person, one undecided voter was like, whoa, he looks like a crackhead, like, or something like that. That was like what they said.
He sounds like a crackhead.
He sounds like a crackhead. And it was just like, this person was like, maybe the person who's saying this maybe has more experience with crackheads than the average. But
let's point out something else.
You don't think she's going to put on her car "Crackhead 2020"?
But there's one other thing about what
keep happening.
There was one other thing about what Trump kept doing, which is that he was saving Biden from himself. There were a couple of moments in the debate where, Biden does not hold, he has never been particularly good at holding long thoughts. And
not an articulate man.
He's not articulate. He's never, I mean, come on, man. Here's the deal. He's never been a great debater. I used to love, when I was working in politics and going to school in DC in my misspent youth, I never missed Biden if he was going to be on the shows, because you could always count on him for a Kinsleyan gaffe, right, where he would just blurt out something that was true with no inner filter. There were a couple of places where he started to kind of wander off on things like the climate change, which I thought was his weakest answer. And Trump couldn't shut up long enough to let Biden get into trouble. And in fact, at one point, Trump says, oh, well, there you go. You're going to lose the left. That's part of Biden's appeal as a general election candidate. And right. Trump, he just...
I always felt like he was the left's answer to McCain in some way. Like, I just felt like there was a similarity there.
Centrist.
Yeah.
So this is a really important point, that actually Biden displayed a lot of discipline last night. And the discipline is when somebody is committing seppuku in front of you, don't interfere, right? Yeah. And that is precisely the discipline that look, you are not morally accountable if somebody pulls out a short sword and disembowels himself. And if you stand there and say, well, that's personal choice, man. That is what happened last night. And Biden, it was not disciplined in his own speech, but he was really disciplined in allowing Trump to be Trump and allowing a florid display of it. So my question is this. Nothing has pierced the 41% barrier for Trump. His 40%, 39, there's this floor of his support. Does this kind of display pierce it, or is it impermeable, but it just lowers the ceiling a little bit? How does this play?
There are two words that I've been using for 4 years about Trump's supporters. And those two words are, they know. They know. It's not like they're suddenly waking up and saying, oh, this man is horrendously immoral and decadent and depraved. And they know. In their hearts, they know they're wrong. I steal this from Barry Goldwater. In their hearts, they know they're wrong. That 41% is going to stay right there because they are cats who have climbed so far up that tree, they are never coming down. They will go to their grave. They're like Nixon's 25% the day he resigned. They're like Archie Bunker, 5 years after, Nixon was railroaded. They're never going to come back. And there is no point in waiting for it. The real question is, did this move enough of a small percentage, and I think it does, of people that could have been on the, I don't even want to say undecided, because I don't really believe in the undecided voter. I think I think a lot of voters who claim to be undecided are attention seeking is what you
haven't met Scott Shapiro. No, I know, I do. But I do think that you're right. I think that people do this because they love being asked. They love being asked and trying to be won over.
I have deep thoughts about government, and I just can't decide, between this shit sandwich and a filet mignon. No, they're not. But I think that I do think there are people who have been looking for a permission structure, one way or the other, to say, I don't want to have to vote for Trump, or I don't want to, or I want to be able to just vote for Biden and forget about, or I want to be able to split my ticket, not vote for Trump, not show up, let this out of my head. And what Trump needed to do last night was to go on television and say, look, I know we've had a bumpy 4 years. I know some bad things have happened, but you know me, I'm your guy. You still, he failed at that. And he's hemorrhaging support with women, with really interesting. Josh Krushower had a piece in National Journal where he pointed out that there's been a 21-point swing in union households in Ohio. I mean,
that's an amazing fact.
He went from +8 with union households in Ohio +13 to being basically +8 underwater now, or -8 underwater. So he had a 21-point reversal. So I think a debate like this just lets people say, I held my nose. I hated Hillary Clinton. I didn't want to say that this was wrong. And now I think, this was Trump's. I actually don't think the next two debates are going to matter that much, except that Trump can only hurt himself now. So I'm all for having them. But I think that I think this election is, unless there is something dramatic in the next 3 weeks, I think this election is baked. Now, it could be baked in Trump's favor that, we don't know about. But if Joe Biden's ahead between 7 and 10 points and somehow loses the election, then all of the pollsters and political scientists in America have to go home.
All right.
I don't think that changed it.
There is important character on In Lieu of Fun that we need to introduce you to.
Oh God! I have her.
Oh, wait a minute! We have a problem. Okay. We're gonna wait on that for a second.
Okay.
Kate, do you have a question?
Yeah, I do.
Now I'm full of anticipation.
No, you're gonna enjoy the anticipation, but you're gonna enjoy the thing. But we have a technical glitch to work out.
All right.
So I kind of want to open up the implications of everything we're talking about. Like the fact that these debates won't matter does not surprise me at all. As I've gone on record on this, I never think that debates matter. Everyone thinks it's just confirmation bias for everyone's own side. They watch them, whatever. A few people, a fair number of conservatives will admit this morning that like Trump had a bad showing, but that's about as much as you're going to get. And I think that what's really interesting is like what this says about what I was going to say is basically Trump has not actually changed his message. What you were saying about what he needed to do and go out and say to that audience last night, or to Chris Wallace and Biden last night, was, well, look, I'm your guy. I've always been here. But he's never said that. He's always gone off and done these weird comedy routines that are tribal and dog whistling and like bombastic and incoherent and like really literally just make no sense in my opinion. And he's done that consistently for 4 years, never changed. Like even if he tacked a little, maybe he could like keep some of the people who support him, like even to get a little more reasonable. But I guess my question is like with the last couple of months, not just COVID, but more the Black Lives Matters protests and the protests around the country, I think we're seeing an America that is like more sensitive and expects more sensitivity, and it's becoming more and more vocal. And he is just, obviously the opposite of that, but that's becoming not like like 38% is like even waning. And so I'm just kind of curious what you think about that. Like, do you think like Mondale would have beaten Reagan if the election was held today? Like,
but you know what I think? If the election were held today,
kind of change the type of people who would elect him.
I think the way the country is polarized, we would have had, instead of a 49 state blowout, Mondale would have had, 20 states, because people are we're now just tribal and partisan. But I do think, when you were talking about Reagan, Walter Mondale himself said remember, I remember because I'm old, and Ben, you remember. But
I read about it.
I think we're around the same age. Kate read about it in a children's
book. I've heard of
Mozart.
I never heard him play.
Ronald Reagan, the actor?
The actor. Go away, future boy. But when Reagan turns to Mondale, and in years later, in a retrospect, Mondale said, this is when the election was over. Reagan turns to Mondale and says, I won't use my opponent's youth and inexperience against him. And everybody laughed. And Mondale, on a panel years later, I think it was on PBS, he said, that was when the
election is over.
It was done. And I think what Trump could have done is create momentum. I mean, no one election does it. No one debate is going to do it by itself. But you can build up a momentum about your opponent that the debates become part of a narrative. And all Trump did was just feed the narrative that he is crazy and mean. Because the other thing we haven't talked about is, on top of all this kind of meanness about Biden's kids. I mean, there were so many points where if I were coaching Trump, the way you get at somebody like Biden is more in sorrow and anger. You say, well, Joe, I don't want to bring up your son. Your other son, is a fine man, but you've also had a son. Instead, it's just this kind of, like you say, like Godzilla, just, burning everything down. And I think that was, if there was any chance for Trump to interrupt this narrative that Biden is corrupt and old and senile and an insider, it just all went away. And he actually played into the narrative that Biden is trying to create, that Trump is out of his mind and doesn't care about you. And every time Biden turned to the camera and spoke to people at home, Trump never did that. Not one. I was watching the whole thing, and I kept waiting for Trump to say, now, and turning to the public. He didn't. This is where not having an audience, I knew all along. People said Biden shouldn't debate. I couldn't wait for the debates because I know that Trump cannot function without an audience. And he couldn't get any feedback on that, and that just made him dig.
That's a really fascinating.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, it's a really great point. I hadn't thought about the feedback that basically that he thrives on, because you watch him in these rallies, and that's
why the primaries were so good for him. They always had these big audiences during the primaries, and there were always 14 people, and he could just play off of that. But when he has to stand, remember that the biggest problem for Donald Trump, I wrote this piece for The Atlantic about how unmanly Trump is, but I didn't write it about how he's effeminate or mincy or, it was about how he's a little boy. He's a child. Dan Dresner's book. He's absolutely right. He's a toddler, and he can't stand still and just pay attention. He can't just pretend to be an adult. He has to have this audience. That's why with the and I don't want to get us too far off, but I'll just end by saying, when the story came out about him turning, to Kelly in Arlington, that story did not surprise me at all, because that's what a 6-year-old does, because he doesn't know how to deal with a place full of the honored dead that requires respectful silence, that requires an adult, stoic kind of persona. And without an audience, that comes into really sharp relief, because the audience always saves them. They laugh, they clap, they hoot. But when you just have to put Trump there alone, what you really see is this scared little boy wearing a grown-up suit, completely having a sugared up temper tantrum. From the point of view of being I'm a Lincoln Project guy, I'm a never Trumper. From the point of view of that, I thought the debate last night was terrific in that sense, but it was really bad for the country. It was good for Joe Biden, but it was terrible for America.
All right. This time for real, we're going to introduce a new character to Tom Nichols in the show. This is the Lisa Page puppet. And the important thing to understand about the Lisa Page puppet is that Lisa Page was prevented by an employment obligation from appearing on the show. So Kate created a puppet that channels the existence of Lisa Page onto the show in a fashion that is consistent with her obligations to an employment relationship. Normally, Kate's ventriloquism is responsible for
it's going to be responsible for today too, I think, Ben.
No, I think this time we're actually going to hear the puppet speak by itself.
But that's going to be me. It's me. It's channeled.
Oh, okay.
That's my ventriloquism's gotten much better.
It's gotten much better. So, Lisa Page puppet, what are your thoughts? And do you have a question for Tom Nichols?
I do. Hi, Tom. Nice to meet you. So, of course, like all sentient beings, I found last night both horrendous and embarrassing. But I guess what makes me more worried is reflecting on a comment you said at the top of the show in terms of how dug in Trump supporters are and how, differently, I presume they felt about that performance. And so what it makes me wonder is, how do we get back to a sense of civility or unity, right? Like, if they are dug in, what hope is there for our country to unify or heal?
Well,
thank you, puppet.
Lisa. Lisa Page puppet. Making sure my Coke wasn't spiked with acid.
It's a live show.
I mean, have you ever really looked at your hand, man? in a way, you're asking the wrong guy, because I'm finishing up a book called Our Own Worst Enemy, where my argument is that democracy is failing because we have become a bad people. And so, what hope is there? I feel like I'm doing a Christmas carol. On their foreheads are written doom. But I think a couple of things will happen. First, while Trump's people, I think, are never going to climb out of that tree, Trump losing could be the way they come down off their cross. Like, for example, with the pandemic, I think that there are people who would be more than happy to just say, okay, let's just wear masks until January and get this thing on, get vaccinated and get it over. But because they perceive everything as potentially harmful to Donald Trump, they are stuck with, I am not going to wear a mask. I mean, I just came from, I don't want to say it's a place here in Rhode Island, somebody I really like who runs a local business, but the person who runs this business makes a show of like wearing the mask under the nose because like earlier this person said to me, I don't think, this is just about the president, yada, yada, yada. And I'm thinking to myself, when this is over, maybe this person can just put the mask on and we can get past this pandemic, because then it won't be about whether or not it hurts or helps Donald Trump. So I think some of the people will finally be able to just come down off the cross, get out of the trenches and say, I didn't like the way it went and I still hate leftists and everything's bad, but that they will not have to constantly check their reactions to everything to see if they're on the right side of where Donald Trump is. Because one of the things that Trump did that has made us a worse society has been to, and the left is not innocent of this. I mean, we can have a whole conversation about the way the left has imbued everything with political meaning as well. Trump has taken that one step further to say everything in your life must have some relationship to me personally as part of this cult of personality. And I think when the Trump administration ends, that ends, because I don't believe there's going to be another Trump. I know people say, oh, it's going to be this pool of voters that are just waiting. Rick Wilson has a great line about this. Trumpism doesn't scale. The halo effect does not spread onto other people. They will be there waiting. I think the bigger danger down the line is they're going to be waiting for a much more efficient authoritarian like Tom Cotton, who is Trump but not stupid. But that's a problem for another day. I think the other way we get past this towards some kind of sense of, I don't think unity. Now I'm going to be really dark and say some of this is just demographics. That a lot of the people that are the most
to die off.
Well, Ben, as they said on House of Cards, you may say that I couldn't possibly comment. Yeah, that's right. I think that there are just people. You got to remember how old a lot of Trump's most dug-in supporters really are, and 5 and 10 years from now, they're just not going to be here. And I think that the demographic change. I think, Kate, the thing you were talking about with we're a more sensitive country, we want to be a more empathetic country. I think that is coming on the heels of demographic change. And I think one of the reasons that Republicans, my former tribe, I am sad to say, that Republicans have become psychotic is because they are determined, instead of trying to win those younger votes, as people like me were arguing, be open to immigrants, reach out to Hispanics and African Americans, and try to, create, being part of the opportunity of America and all that stuff. They've decided that they're going to dig in and go for white minority rule for as long as that can last.
All right, let me push back against your pessimism here. I want to draw a different scenario.
I will have my misery and you will not talk me out of it.
Well, I'm not even sure. I'm not even convinced this is right, but I want to flag it for you and see how you respond to it. So, one thing that we have no experience with is an aggressive attempt at unifying leadership after something like Trump. So, Barack Obama tried for some unifying leadership. His rhetoric is very unifying. By the way, as was George W. Bush's in important ways. But they were not responding to Trumpism. They were kind of responding to an ambient environment. Here you have an opportunity for Joe Biden, who does the empathy thing, to reach out and say, you didn't vote for me, but I'm coming to your community when a derecho hits anyway. I'm going to bombard, I'm going to do all of the performative, and I don't mean that in a negative sense, I mean it in a descriptive sense, all of the forms of empathic leadership that the prior administration categorically refused to do, including and especially to people who are not my base, who did not vote for me. And the question is, the presupposition of a lot of what you just said is that that has no impact. That display of forgiveness and leadership and unity has no impact. And right. My question is, are you how sure are you of that?
I'm pretty sure. I think that the Trump base, I think one of the things that I struggled with while I've been writing this thing was that originally like all book authors, I'm late on delivering my manuscript because I stopped and I had to think about it, about a core contention that I thought I was making. I started by asking, why are people around the world, I am an anti-populist. So where are these populist, movements coming from, and why are they so horrid? These are not just economic, I can't send my kids to school populism. This is like really nasty, hard-edged stuff in places like Poland and Hungary and Greece and India and, And unfortunately, I bought into the arguments early on that, well, maybe this is about globalization. Maybe it is about, change. Maybe it is about, jobs. And the data, I don't think the evidence is there for that. I think this is almost entirely a case of racial and ethnic identity. And I think that what's going to happen is the Trumpers are never going to forgive whoever defeats Donald Trump. I think that will just never go away. They have imbibed the poison that Joe Biden is a socialist and that AOC is pulling his strings. And the other thing you're going to have a black or mixed race vice president. They're not going to deal with that. Like I really resisted the argument for a lot of years that a lot of the Tea Party and, because I was never a Tea Party fan, but I resisted the argument that a lot of this was simply because Barack Obama is a black president. I have come to the conclusion that a lot of this opposition is because Barack Obama was a black president. So there is no when Joe Biden says, look, I want to be the president of everybody, I don't think that's going to matter. I actually think what you're going to see is a lot of these people are going to go back to what they were doing before 2016, which is not voting, which is they're going to just disconnect from the process again. You had a lot of people coming out of the woodwork saying, well, I'm a 50-year-old working white guy and I've never voted. Well, I think that, now they're going to be 56-year-old white guys who aren't going to vote.
Thank you.
Once.
Yeah, they voted once. They voted twice. They didn't get what they wanted. And they're going to say, it's all rigged. It's all rigged. I'm going home. And I think what you're going to see concurrently is that a lot of younger people who thought the system is rigged and nothing matters are suddenly going to realize that, wow, especially if Democrats take the Senate, they actually are going to be more included into this. Because I think anybody here who's following me on Twitter knows I am merciless to the Utes about their voting record. Because they just don't vote. But I think that you're going to get people opting out at the old end and opting in on the young end if Trump is actually defeated, because this will be the first time that a big kind of popular counter revolt is going to remove a populist. That, Ben, to go back to your point about we've never seen this before, I think that's the thing we've never seen before is a big populist, or I call it faux populism. I love Martin Wolf's expression, Pluto populism, which is rich guys bullshitting poor people about how they're populists. But if this actually becomes a broad-based popular movement that overturns Trump and wipes out a lot of the Republicans, that's actually going to, I think, be a much more important phenomenon than some kind of, national discussion about reconciliation. Because these people, first of all, Fox News isn't going to shut itself off after November 3rd. Trump isn't going to go away. He'll probably buy OAN and just, become like Pat. I think the role model.
They'll give it to him. He won't have to buy it.
Yeah, I wonder if the template for Trump is Pat Robertson, right?
That's interesting.
Pat Robertson shocks everybody in 1988. He grabs a primary. He does this kind of far right, surprise attack on George H.W. Bush, and then he gets a TV network and he just sits there and has people send him money all day. Maybe
apparently Trump needs it now that we know what his.
Well, that's the other thing is that that there is going to be, when I talk about people coming off their cross, there's also going to be a hard reckoning here, because if Trump is turned out of office, he and his family could end up in jail. And I was never one of those guys. I never said that, right? I was never, we're going to prosecute Trump. But the New York Times series and everything else that's going on suggests to me that these people are in significant legal jeopardy once they have been turned out of Washington. And then we're going to have that argument all over again. And Joe Biden's not going to pardon any of these people. So, Ben, I think while we're watching the Trumps, drag their asses into federal court and to state court for the next 3 or 4 years, there isn't going to be any healing from that. I just don't see that.
So,
Kate, let's. You have a question, and then let's go to the audience.
When you said plutocracy, I actually thought that you said plutocracy, like Bluto from Popeye. And I was like, oh, like Bluto from Popeye. That's actually perfect. And then you defined it, and I was like, oh shit, that's definitely.
I thought you meant Bluto from Animal House, because last night was a food fight.
But both, like they all, whoever anyone named Bluto apparently sucks. So so that's kind of, but the thing that I just kind of wanted to say and ask you about is I happen to know 4 or 5 people that are voting for Trump for various reasons. One of them is a diehard gun fanatic. Another is also a diehard gun fanatic. Another is also a diehard gun fanatic. And so I don't know if you're noticing.
And then the other 2 are anti-abortion, right?
Right. Or just actually, I mean, to not to mince words, they're just kind of rednecky and don't know any better. And there's kind of, so what I see is super interesting is none of those people were kind of riding the wave of the Tea Party that was happening for a while. And I do feel in the same way that you said Pat Robertson, but I think that the Tea Party was the precursor to this and coalesced all of these individuals around this idea and around a few candidates, but fringe candidates like Bachmann and a few others. And then without espousing those virtues of that or the values of that party, Trump came in and was able to scoop up everyone that had been coalesced in a similar way to how Falwell coalesced everything and Robertson scooped it up. So what I'm interested to know is is this just going to be a cycle of dormancy and resurgence over a number of years? Is it going to be every 30 years we see I don't know like cicadas or locusts, they just like come out of the earth and devour everything? Or is there something like kind of else that we should be thinking about in terms of so this is like a variant on like Lisa's question and Ben's follow-up, but like I just kind of think it's like a slightly different way of thinking about it. Also, I just wanted to point out that like they seem to be coalesced around very specific issue-based rights, like a lot of them. I would say of the people that I know, 2/3. So
I read I wish I could remember who wrote it, but I read a great piece probably about 10 years ago where somebody pointed out that the thing that really united the Tea Party was not politics, but that they were basically pissed off boomers. That this was a kind of demographic yawp of no one listens to us, and we should have been the honored generation, and we shouldn't have to worry about our retirements and bailing out big business, and that in fact the Tea Party and the populist wave behind it was actually not an economic phenomenon. It was a demographic. And so I that's why I think that this is just not going to keep repeating in cycles. I think that this was a unique moment. I mean, I don't like the parallels to the 1930s, but it is almost like the period of industrialization, where we're moving from a post-industrial economy to a knowledge economy to a kind of a wired economy or whatever, wherever we're going in the 21st century. But I do think this was heavily demographic, and I think it was heavily generational, and it was born out of an immense sense of entitlement among old white people. And I think that's not, you're not going to be able to repeat that in 20 years.
We've got a whole string of questions. The first one is from Susan Brewer. I have failed to rapture her into the conversation for some technical reason that eludes me, so I will read her question. She says, please detail the ways in which the president's performance last night represents an impeachable offense. I think there's an antecedent question there, which is, do you think it represents an impeachable offense? And would a Congress doing its job choose to impeach for it? So your thoughts on the subject?
No, look, impeachment, I mean, Ben is more the expert on this than I am, but impeachment is whatever Congress thinks it is. So, is it an impeachable? Sure, if you got enough members of Congress to say his comments reflected that he is not faithfully executing his oath of office, then sure, it's impeachable. But it's not. There's no such thing as a book of impeachable offenses. And so none of that happened last night. Political rhetoric generally, I think, is not impeachable. And also, I think that liberals have to stop hoping for magic bullets like impeachment. That we've tried that. There, as long as one party, the Republican Party, is no longer committed to the Constitution and the rule of law, impeachment means nothing. So I think it's just time to let that go.
Oh my God, I agree with that so much.
They're not going to impeach him. They're not going to impeach Bill Barr. If he's reelected, probably will impeach him again, maybe impeach Bill Barr. But without 2/3 of the Senate, which you are not going to get, it's not going to happen. So stop wishing for magical outcomes like impeachment. The ballot box is the only way to do this, not marching. Again, people know on Twitter, I'm not a big fan of big dramatic cosplaying demonstrations and, handmade outfits and all that crap. The only thing that matters is showing up and voting in gigantic numbers that cannot be faked.
Yeah, let me just add to that. I largely agree with that, with one important caveat. I think the impeachment last year was incredibly important.
Yes.
Not because anything Tom just said is wrong, but because it was important for the House of Representatives to mark the territory as impeachable and say, if a president does this, a House of Representatives will regard it as an impeachable offense. And that's an important quasi-legal, quasi-political marker of behavior that the House will tolerate. Having done it once, you preserve the issue. You say this is impeachable conduct. You don't need to do it again right before an election. That becomes a tactical issue on which I certainly agree with Tom.
And at the time, by the way, I was one of the people who said, impeach him, do it quickly, do it before the election, and get it over with, because you're not going to convict him, because for exactly the same reason Ben said. People are like, well, if there were only more investigations and more. Look, all the evidence in the world. Putin himself could have walked into the rotunda and said, I pay the guy. And the Republicans did. And they were not going to convict.
No, there was, you're saying that as though it's a hypothetical. the president spilled national security information in the Oval Office to the Russian foreign minister. The precise issue that, and he announced, I got rid of the FBI director. He was a real nut job, and I don't have pressure on me because of Russia anymore as a result. He couldn't be more flamboyant.
Hands down, impeachable and convictable in any normal universe. And what I wanted was the House, as Ben, you put it so well, mark that territory. And the other thing I wanted before the elections, make the Republicans in the Senate go on the record.
Yeah.
Because, I think actually if Susan Collins is knocked off in Maine or Cory Gardner in Colorado, that impeachment process is going to be an important part of that, because going on the record, they can now be held accountable for their actions.
I think that's exactly right. All right, we have got 3 questions. We're going to get to them all. John Bordeaux.
Hey, John.
The floor is yours.
Long time, man.
It has been a while indeed. Is my microphone on? Do you hear me?
Yep. I hear you.
Great. Yeah,
I'm sorry. Full disclosure, Tom Nichols is my personal life coach. I can't say any more because of the NDA that's in effect, but good to see you, brother. My question is kind of driven by Pelosi's reference that, the GOP has been a constructive force in our country, and it's now just a cult, and actually we need a 2-party system. And so in that vein, Bob Gates' book talks about Biden having made every decision about national security and foreign policy in the last 40 years have been wrong, in Bob Gates' view, and some other people's. Corey Shockey has echoed some of that. I said, my question to you is, what are you concerned about in a Biden administration? What concerns you about national security and foreign policy decisions? And what could happen, what could be said in the next 4 weeks or so that would make you feel more comfortable with that?
Well, I have for 3 years now said this election is not about policy. All I care is that I wrote a piece a while back where I said I have 2 requirements for my candidate for president: not insane and not beholden to a hostile foreign power. So I did not, even now, has Biden been wrong on a lot of stuff? Well, sure. He's been in Congress for almost 50 years. He was vice president. I think that policy errors are correctable, and you can hold people account for them. So I'm not, one of my friends at the War College, Nick Vosdev, a friend of mine I talk with regularly, who writes, he's very much a kind of old school realist. We get talking about foreign policy, and I said to him the other day, Nick, I just don't care about foreign policy right now. I just don't. I'm sorry. The president the commander-in-chief is mentally unstable and in the pocket of the Russians. When Joe Biden comes in and writes a national security strategy, when I get a look at who his Secretary of State and his SecDef and the chairman and all that stuff, then I'll start to form an opinion about it. But for now, I look at this as an existential emergency. And so the notion that Joe Biden there's nothing Biden could say that's going to change my mind about anything, truthfully, other than if he came out and said, unlike Trump, I'm not in the pocket of the Russians, I'm in the pocket of the, Montenegrins or something. And so
that was good.
I'm just not, I am not worried about that, because I think what we're going to get out of a Biden administration is a kind of standard issue Democratic Party administration, which some of it will piss me off. Some of it I will actually like more than a Republican administration, because I'm in international relations. I'm much more of an institutionalist rather than a, great power, go it alone guy. And some of it I just will, make my way around and think about as a citizen. So,
and can I venture something about some other component of it, which is that some component of it, which will be rehabilitative of destruction that the current administration did, both in international relations and in, frankly, domestic institutions. Like, actually rebuilding the State Department is a bit of a project right now that needs to happen. And these are things that we would have described as totally non-political 5 years ago. You're going to be really enthusiastic about.
Right. I mean, getting rid of Bill Barr and reestablishing some sense that the Justice Department is abstractly interested in, justice. that to me will be enough.
That was
and to say, well, the Biden administration is going to put back, they'll put back the Dear Colleague letter about, college rape accusations. Yeah, if that happens, I'll write a piece and say, boy, I wish they wouldn't do that. But in the meantime, the Attorney General of the United States is a corrupt and malevolent force trying to throw an election. I'll worry about the other stuff later.
All right, Christopher, the floor is yours.
Hi, Tom. Greetings from London.
Yeah.
Hey.
I just wanted to posit that just when we thought that the Mueller report and the fact that Trump was impeached over something that did not include his Russia probe was forgotten, that we had two developments yesterday that I thought might have been even more consequential than the debate. The first was that Mueller's rare statements pushing back on Andrew Weissman's book contention that he was derelict in his duty not to charge or allege that Trump committed obstruction of justice. And the second was that DNI Ratcliffe and Lindsey Graham's scheme to peddle Russian disinformation that Hillary Clinton somehow trumped up the Russian collusion. So I wondered whether you think either of these stories has legs or whether it's more about blowback and trying to help Trump defeat Biden in some nefarious.
These are stories that would have both been gigantic, and we'd be. By the way, nice to see you, Chris. And you guys were talking about my heritage earlier, Chris. I can tell from your name you are one of my peoples, patrioti. So hello. But I don't think these matter anymore. I mean, the Mueller report, Mueller trusted the system. And that was a mistake because, again, when one party is determined to ignore the Constitution and the rule of law, the system doesn't work. Our system works on norms more than anything else. So, Mueller Weissman's book and Mueller pushing back on, that's inside baseball. Trump won this round. He convinced people that anything with the word Russia in it is bullshit. And I think part of, Ben, to go back to your point about, national reconciliation, all that, wait till the books come out and the declassified stuff in the next few years about just how bad it was with Russia. And there are going to be people, maybe not the average voter, but some of these Trump fluffers and enablers in the conservative media are going to have to go take a vacation for a few months because if they have any shame at all, this stuff is going to be even more devastating than the stuff that's already been released. The Senate report alone should have ended all of these arguments, but it didn't.
That's exactly right. But it didn't even end the arguments. It didn't even end the arguments for the people who issued the Senate report. No. That's how little shame they have.
Now, the good thing is, Chris, your other point about that stunt that Ratcliffe tried, that went over like a fart in church. I mean, that went nowhere. It's like, oh, look, the Russians say Hillary. You know what? First of all, if you've desensitized people to the word Russia, you've desensitized everybody to the word Russia. Ratcliffe is clearly a hack. No one cares what he says. Lindsey Graham has become a national embarrassment. He may well, I still think he's going to win in South Carolina, but it's not at all assured now. And I think the other part of that with the DNI Ratcliffe thing is, once again, Donald Trump, the most message undisciplined politician in the world, has blown all these. He has stepped on his Supreme Court nominee. He, for the time being, has blown his taxes off the front page. He blew Ratcliffe off. All we're talking about is how crazy is Donald Trump. And I think that, I'm okay with that because the tax stories are going to come back. There's more to come from the New York Times. Clearly, they've said so. But Amy Coney Barrett was nominated 4 days ago, and we've already forgotten about it. So,
well, that's a good thing. That's a good thing.
Tony, I guess the last question.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no, not a problem, Tom. I'm a
How's
big
Momo?
fan, and thus she's super. I wish I could grab her and introduce you, but maybe another time.
Carla hasn't come in here yet. My cat usually comes in.
Yeah, where's Carla? You want me to go get my dog? I'll go get
Here,
her.
hold on. Wait a minute.
No, ask your question.
Hold on.
Yeah, I'll ask the question.
Oh, no, now.
Oh, he can hear.
Oh, he can hear. Yeah.
Okay. So Tom, can you hear me? I don't think he can.
We can both hear
there
you.
He is.
Aww.
Oh, cats. Oh boy. Okay.
Oh, she's
so
pretty.
I guess I'm going to have to ask this question. I'm a big fan, and so there's 3 people on Twitter that I never would want to get into a Twitter war with. It's Steve Schmidt, David Simon, and Tom Nichols.
That's good company. David Simon in particular, you don't want to cross.
Oh, it's funny watching people like you're going to take on a man who's paid millions of dollars to write quickly on Twitter. I never understood that. So I'll just go ahead and take one from the team and throw this question out there. I understand you're a cat person. If that is indeed the case, yeah. If that is indeed the case, why should we take anything you say seriously?
Because cats are nature's perfect companions, and as Charles Dickens said, "Fortunate is the man who has the love of a cat." A cat keeps you
that
centered.
guy also wrote the worst books in
He
history.
said that right before
He's
the cat
so
started
boring.
chewing on his dead body.
Look at this. See,
Oh, that's actually pretty good. That's a good cat. Okay. I'm a little biased because my dog looks exactly like Tony's dog. So
yes, and this cat
also.
saved us during a fire. She woke us up during a fire, so she's a
really?
hero.
So
yes.
Tell us about
tell that story? Some folks wanted to hear this story, and thank you very much for having me on.
The cat, fire started underneath the floor in a way that we could not see, and the cat came up and was waking us up at this was a day after Christmas, and she wouldn't get off the bed. Normally, you tell the cat, "All right, we'll be there to feed you." She wouldn't go away. She wouldn't stop until we were up. And a firefighter told us later, this is really unusual behavior because cats are usually the first casualty of a fire because they hide. And instead of hiding, this one came up and said, "Wake up, wake up, wake up." My wife went downstairs, woke me up and said, "It smells like maybe, smoke," because we'd had a fireplace going. And I found open flames in the basement, and the cat just waited for us upstairs. She didn't hide. She sat on the bed. I said, call the fire department. And the cat gave us probably about a 15 or 20 minute head start before the smoke alarms went off.
It's pretty amazing.
So the fire department said another 20
incredible.
minutes.
Wow.
The fire department said another 20 minutes or so, the fire would have broken through the floor and taken your whole house with it.
So Tom comes by his cat personness honestly, and
I would
Tom,
like
you're
cats
great
if they save me from fires.
Well,
she's great. She's a great writing companion too. She just hangs out with me while I write, and
really
she
great.
gives good feedback on drafts. So,
yeah. All right, Tom Nichols, you're a great American. It's great to see you.
You too.
And keep
come
the
back
faith.
anytime.
And come back. Yeah, we do this literally every day, 7 days a week. Anytime you want on, you've got something to say. We got a great audience. Come join us.
I'm in. Carla and I are here every afternoon. I will be more than happy to come back and join you again.
I'm a little sad we waited to the end of this to ask about the cat.
It's a great story.
Very cute. Very cute. Very good.
All right, Kate, who do we have for tomorrow?
I think we have Jack Balkan.
All right, Jack Balkan coming on to talk about what exactly?
I think he's going to talk about the debates and democracy and kind of what we talked about today. I think it's going to be fun. It's going to be a super smart combo.
Excellent. We will be back tomorrow. That is 22 hours and 54 minutes from now. And until then, Kate?
We don't have fun anymore. But in lieu of fun, we have cats.